Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
We are back with the Goulets and we are living life above, right? We are here to talk more about our history, our ancestors, our DNA, and tracing that family tree. John and Kathy Goulet joining us. How are you today?
We are fine, I believe. It's a good sunshiny day. Got my garden started for the year last week, so we're in good shape.
And you're based out of, you're in Virginia, right?
Yes, yeah.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Well, besides working with our genealogy, that's about all we're doing. But
Gardening and genealogy. That's good.
it's a good combination. And a few other things as you get older and have to see a couple more doctors now and then than you should. But we're doing good. What I wanted to discuss today a little bit is the definitions of genealogy versus family history.
Sure.
And the simple definition of it is genealogy is a study of a person's direct line ancestors, parents, grandparents, great grandparents, great great grandparents, and down the line. And that's genealogy. Family history is a broader term referring to the more holistic study of the people, the places, the objects, traditions, and stories associated with the family, which opens a whole broad new thing that with doing this. That's why people say you need to, when you get it all put together, you need to write it down and go from there, because that's what it will tell you. It'll give you a lot to write about, the stories that go on. But for samples itself, like genealogy tasks, would be like completing a 5-generation pedigree chart. That again is what I just stated. And that you use what your first degrees going down, second degree, grandparents, 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 and their children is usually included there. So that's your first thing, and that's called genealogy. But to add to it, family history falls in there, and it's broader. It meets a lot more definitions of things because it can include oral history, include stories, uh, things you find out about Uncle Joe that was thrown in jail for stealing castles, yeah, stealing cattle, things like that, which gives it a whole more variety. Uh, they say sample genealogy tasks that we think about is first, like, complete a 5 generation pedigree chart. Then another thing for that, you might want to find your grandfather's, your fourth great grandfather's birthplace. Uh, Sometimes that's hard to find. I mean, these are things that go with genealogy to do it the right way. The other one is determine your great great grandmother's maiden name. That's what I have tried to do, and a lot of people do now. When I put the female in as a family, I use her maiden name to identify her. Now, I think it's My Heritage that will do it, and every time you see it, so and so married to Joan Smith, then in parentheses, maiden name, Blagada, something, her maiden name, so that it gets really confusing in genealogy if you can't find the maiden name of the parent, because it stops that line solid. You can't go any further with it until you get that maiden name to see if you can find more information.
Okay.
So it's pretty damn important. Again, the things like a great great grandmother's. I said that. No, I didn't. I said, I don't know, maiden name. But the other thing that uses newspapers and for your ancestors' obituaries and any notices of births and marriages that you can find. I ran into a problem with my parents. My mother had always told me that they were married on November 1st.
Ah.
And it was I was late. They got married in 38 and I came around in 44. So, a few years difference, but I could never find where they were married. I know that they were blessed by the church and the whole thing, make it nice, good for her. And she changed to Catholicism, but could never find anything on their marriage. And finally, out of heaven, I've been searching all over the place, and I found out I was up in Superior. That's where my mother was, Superior, Wisconsin, with the family. And I was going in. I went into Duluth, and then I went into Superior itself, but could not find anything on the records in their offices. And somehow I forget how I ran across it, but I was looking for something, and all of a sudden I found that they got married in a place called Goulait, Minnesota, which is about 30 miles, not even that far, about 15 miles out of Duluth. But, so it answered a big question. And these are the things that you try to find and do with. Could not, again, it's the same thing. Would like to find the obituaries and where they were buried because it makes a big difference in searching. And usually, if you find an obituary, you can find more about them because they usually talk about who their parents were, and a lot of the obituaries that you don't find other places and you haven't found before. And that's even in the older newspapers. So that's a good example of what you do with that. Also, if you have the source and you can get a wedding picture or pictures of of ancestral couples, the ones you should be able to get of your parents and yourself, but the ancestors, that's another story. Uh, and I mean, that's basically what you're trying to do is solve those mysteries when you're doing that. It's sample family histories come with taking and getting a complete family narrative, and that incorporates photos and family stories. A lot of people sit down and write that, and a lot of people now have put them in places that they can be found. Last night we were watching an interesting show learning about how to use archives and how to really use them right and how to study with them. And that usually you can't just walk in and ask, find me this. You need to call ahead and if they have it, they should have it listed. If they have, they may have their stuff listed online, so you can find a lot of it without leaving your home. Then you can call them or write them and ask them if they can either send you the information or what we can do to find out what was in it, because the archives can include pictures, letters from your doctor, letters from people that want money from you, or the one they had last night, the guy had bought a lottery ticket off a lottery, and I forget what it was, 18.
It's in the late 1800s.
It was right actually during the war, very soon after the
Yes.
Civil War, and they lived in Tennessee, and he bought it. It was for a Louisiana lottery, but it was a big one all over the country. But the guys that did it, found out that they did get in a little problem because they weren't running it real legally. But
Back at that period of time, lotteries would be done, and they would often have some of the information, but they didn't have all of the information in certain places. And what they also discovered was that there were people other than that family that had multiple names that were listed there. And you can find names that you may not be able to find any other way, who are cousins, aunts, and uncles, and things like that. And then once you have that information, you can search for other people and look at who they are, and you get a significant number of people. The other thing is that by getting letters from family, you make a significant number of people that can be found in that.
also in those letters, you can find some good family history some of the time.
That's right.
About the kids or something like that. So it's just a good way of getting more information. The more information you got, the more fun you can have,
That's right.
because you'll find things that you would never find other places in
Yeah.
that way.
The man who was talking about these people, he was looking, they ended up looking, all of the people started talking to each other, and it kept growing and growing and growing, and finding people in ways that were other ways of finding something, and it became difficult, but not if you get the names or the other things that are going on. Also, when you do this, what you do is you count the people who can go ahead and to give you information about when people move. Often you'll be able to find that information through that, and you really grow. That's where I found I was able to get a lot of information.
The other thing, because there's a lot more to this, is uh, as I say, when you get to your great great grandmothers or any of your grandparents, actually, this is usually considered more of a history task, but you can it's history, but it's also involved with this, because in the older families going down, sometimes it's hard to find them at all. So the things there, that's a challenge that you might find through that. Like their other children. You might you might find a great grandmother and have one child found that somebody else found too, and that's about it. But you want to make sure. The other thing too is use newspapers for family members in news articles, society columns, etc. Additions in addition to the obituaries and births and marriages. They're always somewhere in there, and a lot of the old newspapers have them. Also, I found this too, that you can find photos of ancestral couples there too, as well as wedding photos and uh, photos of their first home, both contemporary and present day, which is quite interesting. The other thing that you can use to uh, augment this is you kind of get into a debate over it though, but that's alternative names. And families tend to some reason have alternative names quite often, as I think we've mentioned over with Goulait. Not only do they have the dip names, which were from French Canada, but when they changed their names when they moved to the US, and many of the other families have done the same thing. And these sometimes you're going to have to find through your family storyteller, which you may be, which we are, or family archivist, which we are. But then you just have to become a family history detective and an ancestor seeker. The one thing I liked reading about, and when I was looking at this the other day, there's a fellow that classified some of the what we call genealogists out there. And there's certain genealogists that he called the tree harvesters. And that's when they go online to hunt and they find a tree. So they find that branch on their tree and they harvest it and they just take it verbatim, put it to theirs. It's a non welcome thing, because I've had that to happen a lot of things that I thought, boy, that's a good line, but I have to check it. And I'm glad I did. Uh, they just clip the branches off the trees. They don't take any more than that. They don't usually put the where they got the information. The other one that he likes to call, or they like to call, is the ethnicity. That's a word that's getting me every day now.
Ethnicity. I know it's a hard one.
Yeah, and what they do is they take DNA tests. They're DNS taker and only interested in the ethnicity results. And the last one that they classify as the surfer And that's someone who aimlessly surfs the web for ancestors and more. So that gets you a whole different study of what that's going on with that. It's a learning process. You go ahead. It's your turn.
Okay. My turn. Thank you.
And I'm going to have it.
You guys are so cute. Have some water. Take a sip.
It's called coffee.
Ah, I got mine too.
Anyway, what you do is you make sure that your email is out there for people to find so that they'll be able to get information about you or your family. And one of the things that happened to me, and I still think that I don't know where the information is and if it's wrong, but my maiden name was Malik, and it was a Slovakian name. And I got a note from some people in Texas and I don't have any relatives in Texas at all. And I had a difficult time trying to figure out what was happening. And there was a clump of people from upstate New York, and they all were Maliks, and they were all from Cootie. So what you've got is my family with a lot of things that you would look at and say, "Oh, that's my family." So they did get in touch with me, and we had a lot of discussion. Well, my grandfather married a woman named Otilla or Tilly Malik. And so I thought, oh, here's another one that's important to our family. Because my grandmother's name was Cootie.
Otilla.
Otilla, no. Yeah, anyway. It was the same name and same nickname as my grandmother.
Oh,
And it was interesting. We thought, well, this would be a good one. So I wrote to her and we discussed Tilly. And everybody in the family knew that Tilly was our great grandmother. So it was very, very interesting. And when we got Tilly, there was a big family in that named Tilly that was there that were from Cootie. And so we started following up that way. And the other woman, wrote to us, and it was the same as our family. And we wrote, and I was so excited that we had a Tilly, and it's a name that's not very common. And then we sort of went to doing it, and we ended up with a lot of people who had names that were similar. My grandfather's name was Stephen. Their family was Stephen. And it went on, and names were the same and working together. And I thought, oh, this is great. So she wrote to me, and this is going on now. This started about 6 years ago. And 2 weeks ago, we got an email from a man in Slovakia
in Ukraine.
and in the Ukraine, and near where my family was there. Now my grandmother is Ukraine, but I had the town that my family was, which was Johnstown, New York, and that whole area of New York was my family. I mean, there's people in our family that was Slovakia, yeah, no, uh, Schenectady, all of them with these places.
That area around.
That whole area in upstate New York. And then as far as family is concerned, They were just all around there, and they're to this day. We've got a big clump of them.
You find them.
Yeah.
It's like in where I was born. I always knew that I was related to some people in the town. There was a lot of French, but for two marriages, I think would be related to about half the town now. At least, that works out. I think what was funny with Kathy, she got a letter from a Malik that wanted to know if he was related to you.
Yeah, now
Remember?
he's in Slovakia.
No, it was. I thought it was the one that was.
Oh, there was I don't know if you all have seen it. I wish I could remember what his name was. Uh, he ended up about 3 years later. He was an actor, and his last name was Malik. And he wrote to me and asked me if I had a relative of his. Now he is an actor. He was just recently, within the last 2 years or so, he was Malik. I can't remember what his last name was. I mean, what his first name was. His last name was Malik.
I'm thinking Alec Baldwin. Maybe I'm like it's reversed. No, I don't.
No, that's the thing. If you do a DNA and then you start doing this, you may find that you have an Alex Baldwin in your background.
Well, anyway, what happened was he is Malik is a fairly big name in the Southeast Asia area.
Not Southeast Asia.
Well,
No, it's Russian, it's Slovak, it's Ukrainian.
But this particular one, I think, was okay.
It also was Russian, but I think it was the connection. I thought we were Ukrainian, which we were, turned out, and it was scattered all over because people were moving. So it was fun for everybody to do some working with the name. I learned a lot about names, how they're spelled. How do you know when you're dealing with somebody in Eastern Europe, you're talking about people with multiple names. You also have a spouse name. You have Ukrainian. You have my maiden name was Malik, Malik. There was a man who worked for the United Nations, and his name was spelled like mine. You may hear some Maliks over in Europe who don't have anything like that. There are I worked with somebody and ended up having dates with this man who had people coming from various places in the area where the Maliks are, and they're all together in different places.
It's rather interesting as you go along, and people will contact you. I get contacts a lot from people that knew that their father or grandfather or somewhere had the Goulait name in it, and the problem is, as I said, there's so many different spellings. The general one is the Goulet, like Robert Goulait, who is a cousin. Or was a cousin, and the other one is there's Goulait, Goulettte, and it's just those are just what have changed over time in the last century or so. Well, 2 centuries now. So it's become it becomes very interesting of people who think they might be related to you, and because of that name. But it's one that I'm glad I got, and it's fun to have. But as Kathy is right, you do get different notes from people. I try to look and help and see if I can help them. A couple of them, it's a little hard because they are from a real, crazy type situation that it would take me
Imagine.
a lot longer time to work out than just answer them in 2 days and say, yeah, I know where you're from.
I'd take a few months. It's realistic, right?
Yeah.
I would. Sometimes it's very, very, very different, depending upon who it is that you're working on with a name. We have to sometimes, when we first started out with it, John decided he was going to do the through somebody. Was it Ancestry? The people.
Oh, yeah.
You pay for.
Yeah, this was before I got going real hard on this. I paid them $900 for the only thing they gave me was my grandfather and his kids and his wife. That's all they could give me.
They couldn't find
They
it.
couldn't find it.
And part of it had to do with the fact that we gave them good stuff that now would be relatively easy to
I
do.
apologize. We're out of time. I'm
Oh,
sorry. We have
sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I didn't realize
I'm
that.
not
It's
looking.
okay,
Bye
neither
bye,
am I.
people.
Say
Yeah.
Bye,
goodbye. How do we
everybody.
reach you if we want your services? Tell us.
Oh, you can call us at 1-804-445-9681 and we'll answer the phone. You can get us online at looking back, LOKINGBACK.net, or you can write me personally, JGOULAIT at LOKINGBACK.net, or you can write Kathy by putting Kathy K. Goulait at that same thing. So you can get us that way anytime.
Okay, that's good. Okay.
Thank you,
All right.
guys. Pleasure
Thank
having
Thank
you.
you.
Awesome. Good to see you. Have a great day. I'm on vacation next week with my kids, so I'll be back the following week. I don't know if someone's filling in for me, but enjoy.
I
I'll
will.
see you in 2 weeks.
No, I'm
Thanks.
just glad that we got back together this week.
Me too. I'll see you soon, I hope. Bye, guys.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.